for making that a reality for our community, and it is a reason that people choose to live in Verona. And I'm certainly sensitive to the fact that this adds to what individuals have to pay on their taxes. I'm a new homeowner myself. I certainly understand what that does to one's pocketbook, but this is only $50,000 compared to what was originally requested. That's a small amount, and I would encourage my colleagues to support it.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it is only $50,000, and maybe that sounds like not a lot of money. Perhaps in the grand scheme of this budget it isn't, but the problem with that line of thinking, and the problem with other arguments I've heard, like, gosh, our city taxes are only 30% of the bill, so what's the difference if we raise taxes? It's really not that much. The problem is that the compounding effect of that line of thinking in other taxing jurisdictions, and the compounding effect of that line of thinking from year to year. The gentleman who spoke to us at the beginning of the public hearing talked about how his home value has increased fourfold during the 35 years that he's lived here, but his property taxes have increased ninefold. And how does that happen? Well, it happens when people take the attitude of, well, this is just $50,000. Because when you do that, and maybe it's $50,000 for this amendment this year, but at the end of the budget, and not just this year but other years, it starts to add up, and it gets to the point where our taxes become unaffordable. And I'm very concerned that if we keep on a path where, look at where we're going to be in the 2015 budget. We already know that we didn't fund a patrol officer in the police department budget. So I think that for many of us, trying to find another officer in 2015 is a high priority. We're going to be transitioning to a city fire department, and we know from the staffing projections to meet the demand for a city fire department that the fire department is going to need 2 full-time employees. That's 3 right there, and we haven't even talked about seniors or anything else that the library or public works or anyone else might be asking for. The $50,000 that we would be building into the base in this budget only compounds the budget difficulties that we'll have next year when we're all sitting here trying to put together a 2015 budget that taxpayers can afford. The library is a great place. No argument, I think, from anyone here. But I think given where we are with this particular budget, where we are with property taxes, I can't support this, and I think that it's irresponsible for us to include this additional funding in the budget, and we're only going to create a problem for ourselves in the next budget, which I think is actually going to be even tougher than this one.
Mr. Yurs?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manley stated that the taxes are growing because, well, partially the reason, I don't want to put words in your mouth at all, because we feel that we can, and that we're just a small portion of your tax bill. I would put forth the argument that our taxes are growing because, one, the city is, but also we have built a wonderful place to live. Verona, we don't have to worry about our streets being clear. We don't have to worry about the trash being picked up. We don't have to worry about the sticks being picked up. Now, I know there's a lot of strong feelings on both sides of this, and I've had a number of people speak to me with both arguments. And I guess I have come down on the side that once we get an entity of the city working at the level we do with the library, we should maintain it. We are still a growing city, and that's a wonderful thing, but it also presents us challenges and tough decisions. And if we do not maintain within the city what we have, my opinion is we'll merely only tread water as we grow. Now, I don't believe anybody here has disrespect for the library. I applaud the city for funding the library as much as it has. I think that's a great thing. I think it's down to one of those tough issues where there's strong sentiment on both sides. And that's where it comes down for us to make a decision. I have decided to support these positions. If you disagree with me, I'm welcome to speak with you on it, talk with you more on it. And I am impressed by the number of people sitting in here tonight. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, I think that is a testament to the people who live in Verona. They care about their community. Seeing people here tonight makes Hometown USA what it is. It shows that people care. And that's one of the big things that I wanted to do in this position, is make people care and have people step forward and have the courage to tell me what they believe, even if that means they're telling me I'm wrong. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with the decision, and I'm comfortable with its consequences. And so I wanted to make that statement here tonight since I was not here Monday. And thank you.
Mr. Diaz?
I just want to chime in with agreement with Dale's comment. I think it's good that people are here. I think if you have a budget process and nobody shows up, that means something's wrong. This is not a country club. This is not a privately managed event that only insiders go to. This is one that any citizen should feel perfectly comfortable just showing up. This should be something where people feel like they can just go on YouTube and watch it. And the YouTube stuff has happened this year. And I think everything should be recorded because there's been repeated disputes over who said what. At the finance committee there was stuff, at the previous committee the whole stuff. It would be great if there was a tape and we could just be like, hey, people disagree with what happened, go and look at the YouTube video and make your own decision. So I think this is a really great thing. I guess also speaking on topic now, I also support this amendment. I think the library is extremely important. I think this will help them keep up with the side effects of their success. I think they've done such a good job that people want to go there. And if they did a bad job, we'd probably be talking about cutting staffing because there wasn't enough people going to it. And I guess I'd also like to point out the county does pay some portion back to the library, not enough in my opinion, but unfortunately there's only one Verona County Board seat and out of 37, so I don't know if that'll ever change. And then I guess finally, some people at the public comment had talked about fundraising. Frankly, I would love a coffee stand in the Verona Library, so if there's any way to make that happen, I would appreciate it.
Other comments? We've heard fundraising a couple times. Sorry, Ms. McGilroy. We've heard fundraising a couple times, and I just want to mention, because not everyone here has had the advantage of having the history. But I can tell you that for those of you that don't remember or are not aware of this, the plans were that this facility was going to be built before the library. City administration, municipal court, and the police station. The council heard from people, and the council was convinced. I disagreed at the time, not that I don't support the library, I did then and I do now, but we were told, because of the timing, if we moved the library up before this building, that they assured us we would get $1.5 million in fundraising for the library. We were told that repeatedly. We will get $1.5 million in fundraising for the library. My argument then, and it was proven true, was that once the city commits to borrowing the money for the library, why are people going to fundraise? I mean, they attempted to fundraise, but the money didn't come in because the city already had committed to borrowing the dollars. At the same time that we did that, we did the fields, the 4 softball fields at Cincinnati Park. And as a city, we told the Little League folks, we said, before we build, we support it, but before we build, you have to come up with at least 50%. You have to come up with at least 50% of the funding for those fields. It didn't have to be all up front, but it could be in pledges.
Bless you.
But they needed to have that money. And in a very short period of time, they raised over $900,000 for the Little League fields. For the library, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think in the end, fundraising brought in about $300,000. That was a huge mistake. I said it then, and I would say that now. if you want to build a facility like that, and other communities around this state and around this country do that, they get fundraising, they get the dollars up front, or they get people to pledge to it before they build. We made a huge mistake as a city when we borrowed that money up front, because then people only have so much money and they gave their money other places. So that was a huge mistake. As far as the positions go for the library, and Mr. McGilvery has said it so many times before already, about the additional dollars that we have put into the library. And we support the library. Everybody supports the library here. This is a matter of establishing priorities. And I can tell you, the only communications that I have received on the library that support the additional staffing are the emails or the letters that each of you got as well. And I'm willing to bet that the people that I have talked to, it's at least 25 to 1. When you talk about establishing priorities and where the position should be. I just can't support this. Just adding that additional money at this point right now is not, it's not nothing against the library. It's about establishing priorities. Mr. McGilvery.
One point I'd make about the fundraising, I think it's a great idea. If you can make it happen, great. Because think about what that would do in our budget. If we had that $4.5 million that we still have outstanding for the library, if we didn't have to pay for that debt and debt service in the next 15 years, think what that would allow us to do operationally. I would encourage Brian, and I would encourage anybody else who's supportive of the library, friends of the library, if you can find a way to fundraise and help us defease that debt sooner, that gives us an opportunity to have more operational leverage. That's what we should be talking about. You're talking about spending more money before we've paid for the first thing. And we've invested a lot there, and you need to remember that. We're not saying, I'm not plucking the gem away from you. The gem's there. It's still going to be used. Now, I would contend that some of the things that we've done, we may have overreached. We've stressed our staff. I don't think that's appropriate. I said that was a management problem, and I do think that. I appreciate what they've done, but if you take your staff and push them to the point where they're stressed and unable to do the job, then you have to scale back and work within your means. That's what we're talking about doing. What you're saying now is, you came to us, it's broken, and you want us to spend more to fix it. And we don't have the more to fix it. You have to live within your means. I would say this, 233,000 visits is what you said. What are there, 10,600 people in Verona? Is everyone in this room going to tell me that they've gone to the library 21 times? My kids use the library, but I can say, I don't think the city of Verona residents on average are going 21 times. There are a lot of people outside of Verona that are using it. They're using a lot of the programming. Not that that's a bad thing, but remember, the taxpayers are supporting that. It's on the backs of the taxpayers, and what you're asking them to do is support it additionally for people who are outside. I realize we're part of a global system, and I support that part of it, but when you're asking for more and more and more all the time, it isn't appropriate. Please step back from this. If you want to, as I said at our Committee of the Whole, which was not taped, we've talked about that several times. If you want to pick the library and having it open on Sundays, or the level of service, if you think this is an important issue, then you take it to the people next year. You ask them. You do the work. You don't do it at this budget time because you haven't done the work. And I'm with the mayor. It isn't 50-50. I'm willing to bet if you ask people to raise their hand, and I won't do it, but if you ask them to raise their hand, you're not going to get 50-50 in this room. It's going to be the other way. And ultimately, I hope that those people apply pressure on you in the future. And I also hope that they express themselves. Dale, you're telling me that you're happy they're here? Well, then listen. You're happy people are giving you feedback? Listen to them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They're not saying that we should be spending more money on the library.
Mr. Yers?
I would just respond that I have listened. Disagreeing doesn't mean I haven't listened, because I've listened to people who are not in this room right now who have told me that they want to keep the library going. Comments about the library aren't only coming through emails and letters. They come through where I work. I work at one of the Verona schools. I have parents stop me daily when they've heard stuff about the library, and they praise the library and hope that we continue to fund it and to maintain it. And so I am listening. I am listening. And like I also said before, I'm also willing to take responsibility for my vote. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to have the discussion. I understand there are going to be people who are going to disagree with me. That's going to be true of every vote I make on this council.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, one of the things that we hear is that there's a lot of public support for the library, and I think that's true. And I think one of the other things that we've heard is that people are willing to have their taxes increased in order to pay for additional services. And I don't know if that's true. That's not really what I'm hearing, but I understand that's the argument that's being made. But it just kind of occurs to me that something else that we have in our city that I think is of great value and that brings our community together is our recreational department. And I can tell you from my family's experience that my two oldest boys have made a lot of great friends through Casey's flag football program. And they've had a lot of fun over a number of years doing that. And I've met some parents who, you know, I've developed friendships with through the rec program. And so I think the library is not unique in that it's the only department that is important to our community. But I think the big distinction between the library and the rec department is that people who use the rec department services like the flag football program or the dance program or any of the others pay for it with user fees, and they don't expect the taxpayers to underwrite the cost of their participation in those services. And so I think maybe that's a model that we should think about for the library, that if there's this desire to have a much higher level of services at the Verona Library than you might expect at other libraries, or that goes beyond sort of the traditional, here's a place where you can use computers and check out books and other things through circulation, that maybe we ought to find an optional revenue source. And whether that would be strictly user fees, or if maybe we could create a fund, a dedicated fund in the city to receive contributions from the community to pay for staff and to pay for additional programming. I think that would be a good idea. And I think that the city could promote that fund. And, you know, whether it's, you know, we do a lot of mailings in the city. I know that I still get my water bill by the mail. But I think it would make sense to encourage the public to donate to pay for these additional services. And based upon the money that those donations receive, we could fund these positions, and that would allow, you know, us really a true measure of the demand for the public demand for these additional services, and I think that would be an appropriate way to fund any additional positions going forward.
Mr. Diaz?
I guess I'd just like to say a few things. I've heard from actually a lot of different people, and I would say it's real close to 50-50. I think there's a slightly bigger advantage in favor of the library, but it's real, I would say, margin of error. I would also say that self-selecting samples aren't a way to gauge public opinion, but you probably all know that. I guess the other thing I would like to say is I most certainly use the library more than 21 times a year. I don't have to. I mean, between my wife and I, we have enough money, we could order all our books on Amazon, and through some very expensive daycare, my son has access to good education. So it's not like we need any of the programs. But there are other people, like, unlike me, who use it just as a convenience, but other people who do need it. Other people in the community, and they don't necessarily have the money. And I frankly can't think of a better environment for anybody, adults or children, than the library. And that's why I think we owe it to support them with this staffing thing. I would like to actually give them more, but unfortunately that would increase the levy more than I'm comfortable with. And I guess, you know, I think we have an obligation to provide educational opportunities for children. And if I can't convince you of that, I would like to say that all the people, regardless of income level, are members of the community. And we will all be better off if they have access to education, because not everyone is paying for the expensive daycare like my wife and I are. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Mr.
might,
Gilroy?
thank you for explaining self-selecting. I really appreciate that. No one, let me be clear here. This is what frustrates me about trying to speak to the body, because it's like you won't listen to what's being said. No one is talking about cutting off funding to the library. In fact, this budget, you will have your opportunity. This budget maintains the same that we have done. It's $623,000 in operational costs. That is not an insignificant amount. That is not taking the food out of mouths of babes, Mr. Diaz. No one is turning anyone away at the library doors. I am not promoting that. What I am saying is the library staff, Brian, you've done a great job. Continue to do a great job. We have limited resources. Do what you can. If you have to scale back, you scale back. No one is asking anyone to be turned away, Mr. Diaz. And it keeps getting turned on its head. The argument is not to have a library, to not have a library. The argument is to spread out the resources that the city has throughout the city and not to focus on one. We have focused on the library a lot. You may not want me to, or may not want to agree with me, but the facts are the facts. We have focused on supporting the library. It is time to focus on other things within the city, and the library will have to do what they have to do. Now, the other thing I would point out, the library board can do what they like with the money. We give them the money. They ask for a budget. We give them an amount. They use it as they see fit. Keep that in mind. They use that as they see fit. If they want to cut back on something else in order to add staffing, they certainly could, because that's what the library is allowed to do.
Ms. Ricky had her hand up first, unless you want to defer. Ms. Ricky.
Okay, so I was not lying or trying to make light of the fact that I have received the same amount of information from both sides of this issue. Most of the people in support of funding the library are actually in support of having Sunday hours in this budget session. I've had to explain to them that that is not even on the table, and they have mostly submitted their opinions to me in writing, so I have proof of that. The other people on the other side, I'm really grateful that they feel like they can call me and talk to me about this, because I always return people's calls, and I've received phone messages mostly from the people not in support of funding personnel at the library. And then I've had the opportunity to call them back and say, well, this is why I'm in support of funding 1, possibly 2 library assistant half-time positions. And then I explain that I've spoken with the library director, I've spoken with people who work there, and it's not to even get to fund Sunday hours in the near future. It's not even that, it's just to maintain services. And once I explain that, they're like, oh, well, I can support that. I mean, several people, 5 different people that I can remember, probably more, expressed that to me over the phone after we had a conversation. So I really appreciate that, if any of you are here or listening or watching, that I've had the opportunity to talk with you. I like that you give me your input, and that's why I plan to not support the 2 half-time positions. I would like to consider, and I know the library board will have ultimate say, but I would like to support 1 instead, just to, because I do think it's important to support the library in some way, shape, or form, and I think probably Mr. Simons will not ask for more next year if we give him something this year. I haven't talked to him about that specifically, but I would like to just put that kind of good faith effort in to say, I don't plan to vote for the 2 halftime library assistants, but if we could push the hiring back to later in the year, second quarter or fourth quarter possibly, or I don't know if I can talk about this because it's not what's on the table, but just kind of amending this library amendment to support it, yet not fully.
Mr. Diaz?
I guess I had a clarification question. Can Heather do what she's saying she wants to do?
We're not restricted to just the amendments that are before us, so motions can be made. Mr. Burns?
I was just going to mention several alders had originally made an amendment related to the library, so we're considering one of those, but I would state, I guess my thought is if Ms. Reiki wants to offer her amendment as an alternative to this, that could be voted on as a separate amendment.
Having said that, though, we do have a motion and second on the floor, so once the motion and the second are on the floor, Mr. Bear?
Well, I wanted to respond to some of the previous comments, so if you go ahead and continue that explanation.
I was just going to say that the motion, now that there's a motion and a second, according to Robert's Rules of Orders, the motion no longer belongs to the author. It belongs to the body. So in order to move forward with a different motion, this motion would have to be defeated. Mr. Manley?
Oh, were you?
Go ahead, Mr. Bear first.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. I wanted to respond to some of the previous comments, the first one being the 233,000 number. That number comes off from my best understanding, and I've talked with the library director about this, that's a number from the counter on the door. There were that many people that walked through the door of the library last year. And I think that the 21 times a year, that doesn't take into account those that visit that are not from the community. You can think about members of the media or elected officials, anybody who comes through the library, people from other communities. And those examples come to mind just because of the celebration of the Library of the Year award. And that number has to be reported to the state and to the Federal Institute on Museums and Libraries, if I have that correct. And Brian's nodding his head yes. So that number is real, and I think we have to take it at its face value that there is a significant amount of demand on this library. And I remember Mr. Simons gave us a very good comparison of the comparables with other libraries in our circulation. Our visits per year are significantly higher than comparable communities at our library. And that's a testament to our community, that people are engaged and want to enrich themselves and attend the programs that are offered. And I think it's a fine idea to encourage the public to provide donations. And I'll note that the Friends of the Library have hundreds of volunteers that do help out at the library every year. And I think, Mr. Manley, we could certainly work together on that. I would be happy to work together on getting a line on the water bills to make a donation to the library. Maybe that's not the best way to do it, but we can talk about ways to make that happen. And I think that this idea of scaling back, I would have a very difficult time sitting in a room full of parents whose kids are involved in a program like 1,000 books before kindergarten, and to say to them, no, we should scale that back to 700 books before kindergarten because there aren't resources to make 1,000 books happen before kindergarten. I wouldn't be able to say that to a parent, and I think that scaling back is not the way to go here, that we need to respond to that demand that users of the library are creating for us.
Two things. I want to... no. People are using the mics.
Have you heard me?
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to correct something that I said, Mr. Bear, before on your motion. Your motion does not need to be defeated. An amendment could be made to the amendment, so I just wanted to correct what I had said before. As far as when you talk about buying the number of books, I know this because I'm the president of the Dane County Library Board, and any of the libraries that get money from the county, you have certain standards. You have a certain number of books. You have certain circulation things that are required as part of you getting money from Dane County. So it's not numbers that we make up. There are minimum standards that have to be met. And Verona, I'm very proud to say we have exceeded all those standards. So, Mr. Manley, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. I think, and first of all, I appreciate Mr. Bear's willingness to work with me on ways to to raise voluntary contributions to the library instead of increasing the property tax burden on Verona citizens. I think there seems to be a disagreement about what level of services the city of Verona taxpayers are willing to pay for as it relates to the library. And it sounds like some of us have had very different experiences hearing from our constituents. But I think perhaps maybe the best way and most accurate way to really gauge the taxpayers' willingness to pay for additional services for the library would be to give them that option on the tax bill, and to allow them the opportunity to increase their taxes on a voluntary basis for the library. And whatever that amount of money is, the finance committee could come back, and if there's enough money in that fund to fund additional positions or additional services, we could allocate that money to the library. And I think there wouldn't be any doubt if we took that approach as to what level of higher taxes the citizens are willing to pay for library services. I think we should do that.
Thank you. Mr. McGilvray? Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do that, I want to have Bill respond to the issue on the tax bill. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know, we do not have the ability to customize the tax bill. Tax bills are printed by Dane County and follow a standard format for the state, so we don't have the ability to add a separate line on the tax bill for something like that.
Mr. Manley?
Is it possible for the city to have an insert in the tax bill that says, you have an opportunity as a taxpayer to voluntarily pay additional money for the library and have a remittance envelope?
We have, for several years, we have done a letter. We have done an insert in the mailing that comes from the mayor, and I've always worked with city administration to draft that letter. And certainly we could put something in that letter to do that. I'm saying we can. Now I'll ask Bill if we really can.
Yeah, the city has flexibility to do something in other mailings or other formats. I just wanted to point out that we don't have the ability to customize the tax bill itself.
Okay, Mr. Yurs?
I applaud Mr. Manley for the idea. I really do. And I just want to state again, I do not question anybody's loyalty to the city of Verona or the library. I truly do not. I just think we have two different ways of viewing this. And so if I've mischaracterized that before, I apologize. My question with Mr. Manley's suggestion is, what would be the legality of that money? Would it be earmarked for the library? Would the council then again have to take action on that money? So those would be the questions I have there. I don't know if this is a motion that's to amend the amendment or not. So I don't even know if it's germane to discuss.
I do, before we have the motion though. Mr. McGilvray, you had something you wanted to?
I don't dispute the 233. Let's make that clear. The 233, I agree. My point is that means there's a lot of people outside of Verona using the library. What you're asking for is the people who live in Verona to pay for that with this increase. The other point I would make to Mr. Diaz, Ms. Reiki, and Mr. Yurs, because you are the three who have said you've heard from people, as I said to you at the Committee of the Whole, if you give people all the facts, sure, I have the conversation, but if you give people all the facts of what we're talking about, that's when it switches from the 50-50. And I don't know that, Mr. Yurs, I don't know what you're talking to people about specifically, but when I represent to them that you currently are paying $240 of your city taxpayer money for operational and debt service costs for the library, they're surprised that it's that much. They're still supportive of the library, but when you talk about increasing it more than that, that's usually when people start dialing back. And I don't know that those are the conversations you all are having. Those are the conversations I have. I make sure the facts are out there, and I'm pretty comfortable with my representation that it's I haven't had anybody tell me that they're ready to spend more money, with the exception of Ms. Beckfield, who's here this evening. That's it.
Mr. Diaz?
I guess I'm not sure why you expect me to give people that talk to me your spin on it. I think both of us are biased and about different things, biased, and I think that's normal. And I think, yeah, I bet after people talk to you, they're not as supportive of funding the positions. But I just don't necessarily think that's what I want to support. And I guess I would just like to point out to an earlier comment about if the library has to scale back, they'll have to cut programming. And if they cut programming, it's entirely possible that stuff that's kid-centric would be cut. And like that's the kind of thing I'm concerned about.
Mr. Yurs?
I see this discussion going in a way that I don't think is necessarily all that healthy. And so I also feel that we're speaking in circles at this point. We've all made our cases. I'm not trying to silence anyone by any stretch of the imagination, but I was wondering if we'd be ready to take a vote.
Ms. Doyle?
I'm glad you're not trying to silence anyone, so I'll chime in real quick. Just a little bit to circle back to the public comments as well. I think Verona does have fantastic city services, and that's why I support these library positions, because I feel that that maintains our level of service. And it is great that we have people that, based on those services, want to move here to Verona. And that's why I'm also glad that we're supporting moving forward with looking at our expanding our urban service area to the north, so that we can look to expand in a responsible manner. And just to speak to visiting the library, I know my visits have dwindled in the last couple years since Zoe is now in grade school, but prior to that, I would guesstimate we were going to the library at least 60 times a year, because it was at very minimum once a week. And just to do my proud little mom routine and put on the mom hat for a minute, she was reading chapter books before she left kindergarten. And that the library and services provided by libraries just helped exponentially in that. And I really think that there is a profound impact that libraries have on our community.
Before you go, Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. McGilvray.
For the record, you may call it spin, Mr. Diaz. It's not spin. It's a fact. Giving people facts is not spin. If you want to turn it on its head, again, that's fine. I've had to sit here and listen to you a number of times turn the conversation on its head. Not going to tolerate it.
Mr. Diaz?
Speaking of going around in circles, I think it's just we have different viewpoints and different values. I don't think, in an absolute sense, you're wrong, like saying 2 plus 2 equals 5. I'm not trying to argue that. I just think we have different viewpoints and different values, and that's why I don't think we're going to convince each other. But I don't know. You of course have your right to say whatever you want, and I fully support that because I believe in free speech and democracy and all that other good stuff. And I just hope you would respect my opportunity to give my voice on the issue.
I certainly do respect your opportunity, and I've given you plenty of opportunity over the years. I would remind you that, you know what, I have been supportive of the library. I've been on the council for 10 years, and in 10 years, that's 9 budget cycles. Mr. Simmons can tell you that I've sat with him personally and talked about what we can do to help the library continue forward with its services. But I'm here to tell you, after the 10 years, it's time to realize that you can't have everything. That's all.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you. I appreciate Ms. Doyle's comments about the north neighborhood and the urban service area, and I think that that's critically important, that we find ways to grow our tax base rather than grow our tax burden. And unfortunately, we missed a real opportunity earlier this year to grow our tax base in a significant way. The Brown property, had we approved that development, conservatively would have meant, when fully developed, $400,000 a year in additional property tax revenue for the city. I mean, we're sitting here tonight, trying to argue about how to fund $50,000 for the library. Think of what $400,000 would do to our bottom line. I think that was a real significant missed opportunity, and I hope that some of my colleagues who opposed diversifying our housing stock and giving homeowners additional choices in the city will rethink their position on that item. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we do create a dedicated revenue fund to receive library contributions for the purpose of funding additional staff and programming at the library, and include a mailer in the, or an insert in the property tax bill this year, giving Verona taxpayers the opportunity to make a voluntary contribution. And it would be my expectation that any revenue generated by that fund would have to go through an approval process for the council, but that it be earmarked for library and only library services.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. I personally agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to have to rule that I don't believe that your motion is germane to the main motion. I think it exceeds the intent of the original motion. So I think it's something that could come up at a later time, unless you find a way that you can word it in such a manner that it's more germane to the motion, but I would rule that it's not germane to the main motion.
Mr. Bear's motion?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will, if that's the case, Mr. Mayor, I'll wait until we're not on Mr. Bear's motion. Okay. And I'll make the motion again.
Okay. Ms. Ricky?
I had a question about that motion. I don't know if I should ask it now.
Actually,
'Cause I also
that
have
motion
another-
is not on the floor because I have not recognized it.
So I'll ask it later when we talk about it again.
So we are on.
I would also like to.
Go ahead.
Make a motion to amend this amendment.
Okay.
To reflect half of the amount, so it would be the cost to include a full year library part-time staff at $25,175 with a cost savings of that same amount.
We have a motion by Ms. Ricky. Is there a second? Is there a second? There's no second, so that motion fails for lack of a second. We are back on the motion by Mr. Bear, second by Mr. Diaz, to add the $50,350. Further questions or comments on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear?
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz?
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle?
Aye.
Alderperson Manley?
No.
Alderperson McGilvery?
No.
Alderperson Reekie?
No.
Alderperson Steiner?
No.
And Alderperson Yurs?
Aye.
It's a 4-4 vote, and I will vote no, and the motion fails. Next amendment?
The next amendment, number 5, is to fund a police lieutenant position in place of the police officer position, and to utilize savings from the progression analysis from the anticipated promotion of a sergeant to lieutenant and senior patrol officer to sergeant, hiring a new officer, and a delayed hiring until the end of the first quarter. This has a cost estimate amount of $2738, but no impact on the levy.
Mr. Bear?
I'll move to amend the motion to include the amendment.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bear, seconded by Mr. Yurs. Mr. Yurs? Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd just like to again thank the city budget staff and Mr. Burns for finding a solution to get us to this point where we can make this change and add the police lieutenant to fulfill the chief's top priority in this budget. I think it was a very good move, and again, I appreciate the work done by the city staff to allow us this opportunity.
Mr. Yurs?
I want to echo Mr. Bear's comments. However, I also want to single out one of those staff members, and that would be Cindy. She was the one whom I worked with to form. I also submitted this amendment. She worked with me on the wording of it, and I believe her and Mr. Burns found this to work. And after conversations with Chief Coughlin, I hope you don't mind me saying this, this is going to help him in his structure for the police department. And I've worked closely with Chief Coughlin over this past year and have come to hold a great deal of respect for Chief Coughlin. He does a great job running his department, and he has given ample evidence of why this is a good move to make for the council, and so therefore I will stand behind him again and support this amendment.
Mr. Diaz?
This is just a clarification question. I'm wondering if Chief Coughlin, you asked for 2 different positions in this budget. If you'd be willing to say which was the most important one, and I know you already answered this at finance, but that wasn't taped, so I'd like you to publicly say so if you would.
Yeah, I had to make a decision, obviously, in prioritizing one over the other, and at this juncture in our growth within a department, we need a lieutenant more so than what we need an officer.
Thank you.
Mr. McGilvery?
Since we're going back on Finance Committee meeting minutes and talking about having the record straight, I want to be very clear that the Finance Committee recognized that the chief had his priority as being this lieutenant position. I know Ms. Doyle, Mr. Manley both expressed some concern about not being able to do it with the recommended budget. I just, for the record, I wanted to make sure that the people in the city of Verona understand that Cindy and Bill, before they had the opportunity to go back and see what they could do, they had direction from the Finance Committee as well as from the chief in order to get to this point. And it wasn't that the Finance Committee didn't recognize that the chief had prioritized. We just had been given him, we'd been given numbers from our staff. We respected the staff's recommendation, and then they went back and came up with a solution, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Further questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you'd read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear?
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz?
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle?
Aye.
Alderperson Manley?
Aye.
Alderperson McGilvery?
Aye?
Alderperson Rieke?
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner?
Aye.
And Alderperson Yurs?
Aye.
And that motion passes 8-0. Next amendment, Mr. Burns?
Yes, amendment number 6 was to reduce various department budgets to reflect savings in copying and printing costs. As amended, my understanding is that the reductions would come from the City Council, $550, Administration, $500, Police Department, $850, Public Works Department, $600, for a total reduction of $2,500, which would reduce the city levy by $2,500.
Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to amend the motion to include the amendment.
We have a motion by Mr. Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Diaz. Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, again, thank the city staff for taking a look at this idea and providing me a feedback on what was plausible and what wasn't. This is an amended amendment, so the amounts coming from Common Council, Administration, Police, and Public Works are new to the body, but the end result, 2,500, is new, is the same as before.
Questions, comments on the amendment? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you'd read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear?
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz?
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle?
Aye.
Alderperson Manley?
Aye.
Alderperson McGilvery?
Aye?
Alderperson Rieke?
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner?
Aye.
Alderperson Yurs?
Aye.
And that motion passes 8-0 as well. Mr. Burns?
Yes, the next amendment, number 7, was to delay the hiring of the Public Works Equipment Operator until the fourth quarter of 2014.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bear?
Mr. Mayor, I'll withdraw this amendment.
Oh, right here, okay. Okay, that one has been withdrawn. Mr. Burns?
And amendment number 8 would remove $12,500 from the property tax levy support for the Verona Area School District tennis court improvements. That would reduce the total city contribution to that project from $25,000 to $12,500, with that, the $12,500 coming from the park fund. This would have the impact of reducing the property tax levy by $12,500.
Thank you. Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move to amend the motion to include the amendment.
We have a motion by Mr. Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Reekie. Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This amendment simply would remove the levy portion of what was budgeted from what was recommended to the council, the $12,500 from levy. The remaining $12,500 is from parks fees, and I think it's not. It doesn't seem to me like an appropriate use of tax levy for these tennis courts. My understanding is the city has provided financial support for these courts in the past. And that this is a project of the school district that has taxing authority, and that my understanding is that the Recreation Department does use these tennis courts, although the city has its own tennis courts. So I think that the $12,500 from the Parks Fund is appropriate, but adding to the levy for this project is not appropriate.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Mr. McGilvray? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Reekie.
Thank you. I also have a little background from being on the Parks and Rec Committee on this amendment. It started out as a request for $100,000, and we got it down to $25,000, so I think that's already a pretty big cut, and I would like to, I don't support this amendment because I think we need to have a continued good relationship between the Rec Department and the Verona Area School District, and I think that this amendment might hurt that relationship a little bit. I just don't want to take that risk, and I therefore am planning not to. I plan to vote against this.
Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Reekie, you and I agree. I think the city and the Parks Department have forged a very good relationship. Casey's here. He could probably speak to it if we asked him. They, over the years, they've done a lot of projects together. What's that?
Speak in
A little harder,
There
okay.
you go.
Over the years, I think we've done a lot of great projects where we have joint or a partnership, and this would just continue with that type of partnership. It's important to note that Casey runs a pretty big program in the summer that uses that court and those facilities pretty heavily. He also runs basketball, volleyball, a lot of other things where it speaks to your point about relationships, and I would hope we could find a way to continue that. The other thing I would like to say too is in the past, we've done a 50-50 when it comes to levy versus park funds, and the point I made at the committee of the whole that wasn't taped, and I think it's important that we at least continue that. We can't expect the park funds to support these kinds of rebirths, is what I would call it. You're rebuilding the project, and you know, this is built once, but this is money that you're spending to upgrade it, and I think it's important that there should be some tax levy money in there.
Mr. Yurs?
Forgive me, since I was out on Monday, could someone kind of, Mr. McGilvray just did a little bit, could someone fill me in on some of the history behind this? Is this something we've done before? And again, I don't mean to waste anyone's time, but this is one of the amendments I'm on the fence on. And if a strong case can be made, I would be willing to support paying the $12,500. So if I could just get a little more background, again, I apologize.
Mr. Dudley is here, so if Casey wants to come up while he's doing that, I will tell you my position on this is that it wasn't always the case that the school district and the city had the relationship that we have today. We built that trust over the years. We have an excellent working relationship, and I would hate to see that relationship be hurt in any way. So, Mr. Dudley.
Yes, I could speak to it. I've been here 12 years, working on 13 in February, and we've had a great relationship with the schools. I use the tennis courts every summer for tennis instruction, and every year they give us a minimum of 2 to 3 courts depending on our numbers, and With this, we've worked out the agreement that we would be guaranteed those 3 courts all the time, in keeping up the goodwill to help contribute to improve these tennis courts and add that extra 2 courts. That way in the summer when they're having their programming, we will have our 3 courts available. None of our other tennis courts in the Verona are more than 2, and with our instructional program, it requires a minimum of 3 courts.
Mr. Steiner, Casey, hold on just 1 minute, please.
Casey, I would like to have you talk a little bit about our relationship with the city when it comes to using those courts after school hours, especially at nighttime, by people of the city.
Yeah, well, they're open to the public, so they're not just used by the school. Many people come there. They've added lights to, I believe, the first 2 courts. That had some city assistance in that funding, and they are used quite heavily in the evening, as well as we offer adult and youth instruction in the evening as well. So we can coexist with these additional courts.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Casey. Other questions, Mr. Diaz?
I just wanted to add one thing. I do appreciate the work that Alder Bear did on this, because I know everyone wants to see lower taxes, but not everyone agrees on what we're supposed to cut. And I don't think this is something we should be cutting, because I think the schools are really important, and I'd like to see the city keep a good relationship with the schools. But I just want to say I really appreciate your effort, and I sympathize because I feel like some of my cuts aren't gonna pass either.
Further comments? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you'd read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear.
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz.
No.
Alderperson Doyle.
No.
Alderperson Manley.
Aye.
Alderperson McGilvery.
No.
Alderperson Reekie.
No.
Alderperson Steiner.
No.
Alderperson Yurs.
No.
That motion, the amendment fails on a vote of 6-2. Mr. Burns, please.
The next amendment, number 9, was to remove funding for the Public Works operator position.
Mr. Diaz?
I'm withdrawing that amendment.
Okay. Next amendment?
Amendment number 10 was related to the bicycle lane striping, and I believe that's already been withdrawn. Is that correct? So then we're to amendment number 11, which was to remove $5,000 from the planning budget for consultant services related to the North Neighborhood Plan. That would be an expenditure reduction of $5,000 and a levy reduction of $5,000.
I move to amend the city budget with the motion.
To amend, yeah.
Yeah.
We have a motion to amend. Is there a second? Is there a second? Seeing none, that motion fails on a lack of a second. Mr. Burns?
Amendment number 12 is to increase funding for the senior center for the administrative support position to increase the hours from 520 to 1,000 hours per year. That has a cost impact of $6,459 and a levy impact of $6,459.
We have a, go ahead, Mr. Diaz.
I move to amend the budget by adding funds to, as read by Mr. Burns.
We have a motion by Mr. Diaz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yurs. Comments, questions on the motion? Mr. Diaz?
I just wanted to say I think basically what I said at the committee of the whole meeting, I think the senior center does amazing work. I think they deal with a lot of different issues and provide a lot of excellent services for people in Verona. And while of course their mission is to deal with senior issues, I think they're a great community center for everyone, and I've seen people of all ages. And different departments have different ideas on how they budget. And I think the senior center has a reputation as being a little more conservative, and I trust the director, and I think that she wouldn't ask for this unless it was a dire need. So I hope that this has the support of the city council.
Mr. Yurs?
I would like to echo Mr. Diaz's comments on the senior center here in town. We have a wonderful senior center. It provides a lot of great services for many seniors. I know many who attend, and with a wide variety of different programs. And speaking to a constituent over the weekend, actually, just learning a little bit more about what this position would do, and being there to answer the phones for some seniors who need to ask simple questions on day-to-day lives. So that's why I'm going to support this amendment. I am also in complete agreement when other alders have said that we need to support the seniors more strongly in the city. I am very excited that the city is working on bringing in a new senior housing development. And if we can do more, I know there's more related to seniors, and so I'll wait for some of those comments later. But I will be supporting this amendment, and I hope others do as well.
Other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you. I was wondering, Bill, if you could kind of get us up to date. Remember, we spoke about a running total as we were going here with this. Cindy, have you been doing your running totals?
Speak into your mic again.
Yep. So if we were to add this, what that would mean, basically. And the reason I'm asking is, I will say this, as Chair of Finance, I think it was a mistake on my part not to advocate harder and stronger for this particular piece. I think Mr. Diaz raises some good points, as well as Mr. Yours. I know you've all listened to me talk about what we're going to have to do in the future for our seniors. That's one of the departments I do think we need to be looking at a little bit harder, because that population is definitely growing, and I definitely think I wouldn't say we've been short-sighted, but we haven't been able to make the adjustments there that I think we need to. So I would be supportive of this. I think I probably should have been more supportive at the finance level.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Bear?
I'd just like to add that I think that we learned recently that the senior center director will be retiring at the end of this year or early in January, I believe. So I think that having this person, this added hours for the administrative assistant will certainly help help the senior center continue their level of services while they're waiting for the new director position to be filled, which my understanding from an earlier committee meeting would be in February or March. So.
Other questions or comments? This one brings a smile to my face. Those of you that know me know that I've been a huge advocate for seniors. I've had the opportunity for over the past 15 years to work with the Dane County Area Agency on Aging. I chaired it for a number of years and served on that body for over 8 years. So we always say, those of us that are involved in seniors and really believe in seniors, that our number one issue is to advocate, and I think that this is a good motion and should be supported. Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because, and first of all, I want to make sure I'm clear. This is $6,400 is the proposed increase?
Mr. Burns?
That's correct, $6,459.
Okay. Do you think it's likely that with Diane retiring that we will have personnel savings as we're looking for her replacement that would be able to fund these costs without having to have a levy impact?
Mr. Burns?
I understand the suggestion, and I think that's a good idea. However, we don't know at this point at what level we're going to fill the new director position and what they're going to take for benefits. So I'd be a little cautious of counting that and perhaps limiting our ability to fill the director position.
But won't there be a period of time where we're not paying for a senior director because it's a vacant position?
That is correct. The senior center director has indicated her last day would be January 3rd, and as we discussed at the Personnel Committee earlier this evening, we're likely looking at a start date potentially around the beginning of February or sometime during February, depending on how much notice they would need to provide. My caution is just that if we potentially refill that position with somebody who would be taking family benefits, which is a higher level of benefits, or if there's other costs related to the compensation, there could be other costs. There will definitely be savings. That would be an option to apply that here. I was just indicating what the caution would be is there could be other things that would also contribute to cost. We don't know that yet, however. We do know that there would be a period of savings.
Other questions or comments on this motion? I'm not seeing any right now. Cindy, you have an update?
As far as where we're at right
Cindy,
now.
can you speak into the mic, please?
Where we're at right now with the amendments we've gone through, but including the 18,000 for the health insurance, we would be at 22,409 increase in levy, which puts us on the equalized rate at a 3.2% increase.
Further questions or comments? Thank you, Cindy. Further questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you would, please.
Alderperson Bear.
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz.
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle.
Aye.
Alderperson Manley.
No.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Aye.
Alderperson Reekie.
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner.
Aye.
Alderperson Yurs.
Aye.
That amendment passes 7-1. Mr. Burns?
Yes, the next amendment, number 13, was to add funding to the senior center to allow for transportation for special events. The amount is $4,800, and that would have a $4,800 levy impact.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Diaz?
I move to amend the city budget to add funds for the senior center transportation for special events at a rate of $4,800 back into the budget.
We have a motion by Mr. Diaz, second by Mr. Bear. Mr. Diaz?
Speaking of the great things that the senior center does, one of the things they do is put on various different events, and for a senior population, transportation is important. And without this money for the special events, that means certain people don't get to go. And so that's why I think it's important to fund to give people in Verona an opportunity to go to things that maybe they wouldn't have a chance to.
Other questions, comments? Mr. McGilvery?
Yeah, Mr. Burns, I wonder if you could speak directly to the $4,800 reduction. Is that, refresh my memory and for the record, is that a complete elimination of the transportation fund, or is that a reduction over a request?
Mr. Burns?
This is not a complete reduction of transportation. This would maintain the status quo, which is that transportation services are provided primarily around the midday meal and midday events. The budget requested $4,800 to provide transportation beyond what we're currently providing for additional special events that take place during the course of the year. And this would remove that request for the additional funds and return it to the status quo transportation.
Further questions or comments? Ms. Doyle?
I'd just like to add that, like the library, the senior center is a wonderful opportunity to foster community, and through having this transportation available, it really allows people who otherwise, as Alder Diaz said, would not be able to utilize these services to participate, which I think is a fantastic thing, and am a little sad that we don't have the additional funds, but know that we do have constraints placed on us.
Any additional questions or comments? Not seeing any. Ms. Schofield, if you read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear.
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz.
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle.
Aye.
Alderperson Manley.
No.
Alderperson McGilvery.
No.
Alderperson Reekie.
No.
Alderperson Steiner.
No.
Alderperson Yurs.
Aye.
By breaking the tie, I will vote no. And the amendment fails. Mr. Burns, please.
Amendment number 14 would remove the $15,000 carryover of 2013 funds for the fire and EMS consolidation study. This is the same carryover that was discussed previously with amendment number 3. However, this amendment would not specify a purpose for any funds that would be carried over, so those funds would just return to the general fund balance. There would be no levy impact.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Diaz?
I move to amend the budget by removing the $15,000 carryover for the fire EMS consolidation study.
We have a motion by Mr. Diaz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bear. Mr. Diaz?
I guess this is just basically the same discussion we had previously. I think that there's a limited shelf life to studies, and right now we're just not ready to talk about consolidation. And I would hate to see us run a study right now, spend $15,000 on it, and then wait 3 or 4 years, and then just have to do the study again. At this time, we don't actually even have the city department yet. It doesn't exist till next year. So I would really rather see us just hold off on this.
Further questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to make sure I understand. By not spending the money on the study in this budget, we will still not. There's no way to have a $15,000 improvement to the levy.
Mr. Burns?
The money for the study is budgeted in the 2013 budget. Therefore, if the money is not carried over, it would just be unexpended funds in 2013 that would have the effect of increasing our undesignated fund balance at the end of 2013 by the amount unspent on the study. So that would not have a levy impact on the 2014 budget unless there were a motion to apply funds from fund balance to reduce the levy in 2014.
So it'll just go to our fund balance.
It would just go to the fund balance
Okay.
unless there is a separate action to appropriate those funds for another purpose.
Thank you.
Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you. This is what I would call political football. We're just playing a shell game here. The money's going from one place, going into the reserve fund. And the intent, of course, would be if a study is going to be done, this body right here would have to decide that this study should be done. You take the money out, that's fine. It's not really going away. I think the important thing to remember is ultimately you will decide, whoever is on this body in the next year or two, when that study or if that study should be done. To me, again, you're just moving money around. You're not really doing anything significant with this amendment.
Further questions or comments on the motion? Ms. Reekie?
Does moving this money to the fund balance mean that the study can definitely not be done in the next year?
We would have to have approval from the council to do it. I mean, if there were requests to have a study and fund the study, we would have to have approval from the council it could go through the finance committee or whatever, but council would have to approve it. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you would, please.
Alderperson Bear?
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz?
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle?
Aye.
Alderperson Manley?
Aye.
Alderperson McGilvery?
No.
Alderperson Reekie?
I'd like to abstain from this vote.
Alderperson Steiner?
No.
Alderperson Yurs?
Aye.
The motion passes with 5 votes for, 2 against, and 1 abstention. Mr. Burns, please.
The next amendment, number 15, was to remove funding for the replacement of cameras at the City Hall and Police Facility. The original dollar amount was $9,800 with a levy reduction of $9,800. I believe there was an intent to amend this. Is that correct?
Mr. Diaz.
Sorry. I'm actually planning on withdrawing this based on further conversations with the police chief. Well, I think it's highly debatable whether surveillance cameras actually make people safer. There's studies on both sides of the issues. I'm totally a believer in the potential liability issue. And at the last meeting, the chief, for what I think is very good reasons, didn't want to talk about where there were and where there weren't cameras. However, in a private discussion, he did mention that to me, and that's convinced me that it's important to fund this. I guess if you want to know what cameras are out, ask the police chief.
So you're withdrawing the amendment? Okay. Mr. Burns?
Hi, amendment number 16 was related to the funding of the police lieutenant that was addressed previously. That would then bring us to amendment number 17, which was a direction to staff to reduce the non-personnel expenditures to achieve a tax levy reduction of $41,000. As requested after the discussion at the committee of the whole meeting, staff has prepared a list of suggested reductions to the budget to accomplish this goal. That was provided in a separate sheet, and I'll just run through what the impacts would be very briefly. First, recognizing that there's likely to be an extension to the income continuation insurance premium holiday into 2014, levy impact $15,833. Increasing revenue for title company search fees. Right now it's $30. The proposal would be to increase that to $35 for a regular request, $60 for a rush request. We're anticipating that would generate $4,000 of additional revenue. Reducing the fuel budget in the police department based on a projection of $3.75 per gallon versus $4 per gallon, savings of $3,500. Removing funds for the second recruitment process for the police department and funding it through vacancy savings if additional recruitment is needed, saving of $4,600. Reducing the fuel budget in the public works budget based on an estimate of $3.75 per gallon, $3,500 in savings. Reducing the utility budget projection in public works, $3,000. Reducing the public works street lighting budget projection by $2,000. This is a personnel savings, but something that we thought would be important to bring to your attention, that we're anticipating a staff turnover at the library, which would result in a reduction in the cost for that position of $1,620. And then reducing the operating line item portion of the library budget by $3,225, as determined by the library board and the library director. And I believe that their intentions would be to reduce funds for sorter maintenance, delay a computer replacement, and reduce funds for window cleaning. The net impact would be a levy reduction of $41,278.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Mr. Manley?
First of all, thank you, Mr. Burns, for that summary, and I want to thank you and your staff, and I'm sure that Cindy, you had a significant role in this, and all of the department heads, I suspect, played a role in this, and I just want to thank you and appreciate you, for the work that you did to find some additional reductions in the budget. I'd like to ask that we delay action on this amendment until we're done with the other amendments, so that I have a better idea of what the running total is, because I may wish to amend my amendment.
We will do so. We will hold that one over. Mr. Burns?
Amendment number 18 would be to increase the municipal court fee from $28 in the recommended budget to $38. And just to be clear, the current level that's charged is $23. The recommended budget included an increase to $28. This would further increase that to $38, which is the new amount allowed by law. That's anticipated to generate an additional $7,000, which would reduce the levy by $7,000.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think we're the beneficiary of some fortuitous timing. The legislature and Governor Walker recently enacted a law that allows municipalities to increase the amount of revenue that they retain for forfeitures involving ordinance violations. And, I guess I look at this from the standpoint of the difficult budget that we have. Here's a way to raise some revenue that isn't coming from taxpayers. It's coming from folks who violate ordinances. And I'm comfortable with that trade-off and hope that you all will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Other questions or comments on the amendment?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. McIlroy.
I will second that.
I'm sorry. We have a motion and a second, seconded by Mr. McIlroy. Further questions or comments on the motion to amend? Mr. Yurs?
I just want to say that I will support this amendment. I do think it's a good idea to capitalize on an area where, I agree with Mr. Manley's assessment. If you've done something wrong, I guess there's really it's an easy call. And so I want to thank him for finding that and putting forth this amendment.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Ms. Schofield, if you would, please.
Alderperson Bear.
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz.
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle.
Aye.
Alderperson Manley.
Aye.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Aye.
Alderperson Reekie.
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner.
Aye.
Alderperson Yurs.
Aye.
And that amendment passes 8-0. Mr. Burns, please.
Amendment 19 is to add $20,000 to the fire department budget, which would allow for an improvement to the evening staffing coverage. While this has an expenditure increase of $20,000, the city levy impact is $16,594, as this would also have an impact on the portion of the fire department funds coming from the town of Verona.
Thank you. Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I authored this amendment because I really feel strongly that one of the most important services we provide to our community is public safety. And I think that the fire department plays an absolutely critical role in promoting public safety and ensuring that when we need help, we get it, and we get it in a timely manner. And I as much as I feel strongly about that, and I'm glad that we're moving to a city department, and I'm glad that the chief has a plan in place to get us closer to, and in the next budget, hopefully 24-hour coverage at the police station. I was not able to identify a source of funding that was an ongoing source of funding in order to pay for this additional expense, and I'm not, as much as I support the additional funding and would like to give Chief Giver additional tools to have nighttime coverage at our fire department, I just can't, I don't have a way to fund it, and in the absence of a way to fund it, I'd like to withdraw the amendment.
The amendment has been withdrawn. Mr. Burns?
Amendment number 20 related to the police lieutenant position, which again we've addressed above. That brings us to Amendment 21, which is for, it's another amendment for addition of 2 library assistant positions, 1.0 FTE total for the library. I guess this would be available if there would be a modification from the maker of the motion.
Ms. Reekie?
Thank you. I would like to try again to amend the amendment to include 1 half-time full-year library assistant. And hope to get a second.
I'll second.
And we have a second, so let's just make sure that we have the correct costs so we know what we're talking about
Okay,
here.
I have written here from Cindy $25,175.
That would be half of what we are, yep. So we have a motion by Ms. Reekie, second by Mr. Bear. Ms. Reekie, any additional comments?
I guess I'm just trying to be as reasonable as possible, hearing from the people that I've heard from, kind of half and half on each side, like I mentioned many times before. And I have talked personally with library staff that are not able to do the jobs that they've been hired to do because of needing to man or woman the circulation desk. And only certain staff members are allowed to do that because then they have access to our public information. And so volunteers and I believe pages are not allowed to do that. And so we can't just fill in with volunteer donated money for those kinds of jobs. So I would like to at least give 1 half-time position to the library. I think they need, actually don't just want, but need more, but I would like to give them something.
Additional comments, questions on the amendment? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you would, please.
Alderperson Bear.
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz.
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle.
Aye.
Alderperson Manley.
No.
Alderperson McGilvery.
No.
Alderperson Rieke?
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner?
No?
Alderperson Yours?
Aye. That amendment passes 5-3. Mr. Burns?
Amendment 22, also related to the bicycle lane striping, and I believe that's been withdrawn. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm in favor of withdrawing that at this time.
Okay, Ms. Burns?
Amendment 23, also related to the funds for Cathedral Point Park, and that has been addressed and voted on previously. Same with number 24, relating to the lieutenant position in place of the police officer. That has been acted on. That would bring us to amendment number 25, which was suggested by staff to adjust the effect of our health insurance cost estimates to reflect changes made during the open enrollment process, which we're anticipating an addition of cost of $18,450 for additional employees choosing a higher level of benefit than what was originally included in the recommended budget. That would also have a levy impact of $18,450.
Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move to amend the motion to include the amendment.
We have a motion by Mr. Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Doyle. Mr. Bear, anything to add?
No, I think we have to certainly respect the choices made by the city employees, and I guess a process question: can we, I guess it's hard to line up because of the state's open enrollment dates, line up our budgeting process with those choices, but these are choices that have the potential to make big impacts on the actions that we take on this budget.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, the timing is a challenge because of the open enrollment timeframe from the state, and often during open enrollment we'll have people choosing from one individual plan to another, and that might have a minor impact. I think the larger impact here is that we have an employee that has signed up for family benefits that did not take that previously, so that's why it's a larger cost. Is it a challenge, but we wanted to provide the most accurate information when it became available to include in the budget.
Questions or comments on the amendment? Mr. Manley?
Thank you. Just a question, Bill. Is this the type of thing that we would, or have we ever paid for something like this out of the personnel contingency budget?
Mr. Burns?
We have not paid for items like this out of a personnel contingency. We've used personnel contingency for areas that are an increase or a modification to the wages or benefits provided. For example, a cost of living increase or a settlement as a result of a collective bargaining agreement. When there are items where an employee is choosing a different level of benefits, that's something that we've budgeted for if we're aware of it, or if it's something that would come up after the budget was adopted, it's something we would just try to absorb elsewhere within the budget. Sometimes that could be savings if you had an employee with family benefits who switched from single. In this instance, it's the opposite, somebody that's choosing family benefits that didn't have that previously.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments on this amendment? Seeing none, Ms. Schofield, if you'd read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear?
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz?
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle?
Aye.
Alderperson Manley?
Aye.
Alderperson McGilvery?
Aye.
Alderperson Rieke?
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner?
Aye.
Alderperson Yours?
Aye.
And that motion passes 8-0, that amendment. Okay. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I did want to suggest one other item for possible action, and this is another item that came late in the process related to the senior center. When the county budget was adopted, we learned that they are, as part of that budget, are increasing the cost for the meals served as part of the senior center nutrition program from $3.75 per meal to $4.71 per meal. The Senior Center Director and Activity Coordinator have put together a plan to absorb that change within their budgeted levy funds. That would be through a combination of increasing the per meal cost from $4 to $5, tightening up on the extra meals ordered and additional circumstances where meals are paid for, The net effect of that would be increasing the expenditures for the senior center by $8,000 and increasing the revenues by $8,000 for no levy impact. But again, since we have that information available, that would be available for action to include in the budget to reflect what their intention would be going forward.
Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move to amend the motion to include an amendment as described by Mr. Burns. Is that
Second.
in it?
We have a motion and a second by Mr. Diaz.
And-
That's fine.
Okay, and Mr. Burns, so there's no $0